Mr. Hidalgo, we are live.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and members on the internet. Today is Thursday, September 8th, 2022, and I'd like to convene the Finance Committee meeting for the Council Rock School District. Just before we go to do a roll call, I'd just like to remind everybody that please speak after being recognized so we can kind of keep track of who's speaking for those who don't know our voices on the call, because this will not be televised, just recorded and posted on YouTube. With that being said, I would like to start a roll call to my right, please.
Thanks. Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Matt Frederickson, IT Director.
Ed Salomon, School Board.
Mike Thorworth, School Board.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Mary Ann McKee, School Board.
Yota Piley, School
Ed Tate, School Board.
Bob Reinhardt, Business Administrator, Acting Business Administrator, I would say.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board, and I believe Kristen Marcel will be here shortly. I think, do you want to say, we got Doug Taylor here in the house.
Board. Nice dance.
Matt Adams, Transportation, Durham, John
Ziegler.
and
Bob Scarpa.
Bob Starpa, and we have about 3 members of the public at this time. So, that being said, I'm just going to run through a couple of the housekeeping items that we're going to put on for board consent agenda. There's no presentation for these, but I'll read them out there. If anybody has any questions, just raise your hand and we can ask them. The Homestead Farmstead 2022-23 district agreement is just housekeeping, where we have to sign something to, have those tax alleviated process sent it out. So just raise your hand if you have any issues with that. Another housekeeping item is the approval of the Tax Collector Coalition delegate, and I believe we have some in-house people, the business officers representing that, and that's taken care
I'm
of.
going to be on temporarily, and Colleen is going to also be on temporarily.
Okay, next is the approval of the air filter bid 2236, which is an annual replacement of our air filters. Pretty standard stuff. If there's no questions, I'd like to add those to the consent agenda for the next board meeting. And then finally, we're going to reject the South Auditorium bids 2233, and I think that's the one you said that nobody bidded on.
Correct.
All right,
Yeah,
so we're going
just so the South parents know what's going on there. We had no bidders.
no bidders, no bidders on
And
the
I do
auditorium.
believe it's going back out to be rebid again.
But there is light. We got light.
Yeah.
All right, so we're good. So the next, so I don't know if this is discussion or what. It doesn't seem to have I think that's all the board items, so we're going to stop it there. And then I guess if I read this correctly, transportation update would be the next item, which I guess would be a discussion item, not a board item. Anybody want to leave that on, or should we?
So the way we have the slide deck set up is Doug Taylor giving us an overview of the Richboro Elementary project. He was here last time to speak with us in the community. We asked him to come back and revisit some of what he has done. We've asked Bob Reinhardt to give us a finance update. Some of what Bob will talk about will be educational to us as well as the community, with an emphasis on the next project that's on our docket for Richboro Elementary. Included in that, Bob will talk again about some larger items with our budget, and then the transportation update. And as Mr. Hidalgo said, we have John Ziegler and Bob Scarpa here from Durham, and they have some slides that they'll go through with us to give an update on where we are with transportation. So, Mr. Hidalgo, if you want to go in a different order, that's fine.
No,
or
only
we can go.
because the sheet came in with transportation under board items, so I didn't read up there. We'll just go in order what's presented on the thing. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Yes, the auditorium lighting is back out, sure. So we are getting questions. We do have active bidders, and the mandatory pre-bid is next Tuesday.
Okay.
So we expect to see a group this time that are interested in the project. So for tonight, hang on. Now I'm just going to turn it on first. There we go. So we're going to talk about the Richboro Elementary School, a list of projects that have been completed for the district in the last 12 years. I think we wanted to revisit the history of that, heading into other discussions perhaps later, and the Richboro Elementary School project first. So I'm not going to say a lot about the budget other than we have the estimate of probable cost to start the project. We recently received the schematic design drawings. The budget is basically in alignment with the estimate of probable cost, so there's no immediate need to adjust the budget based on the drawings we recently received from Trader Group. We will see another set of drawings, design development, so those will be more refined. We'll have more details than we have today. We'll do another review of the budget and make sure that we're still on track. You know, as we go, we kind of work it back down through each phase to keep it on task. So we're confident with the budget today, and we'll take a look at it again in November, which tees off the Act 34 process as well. So from a schedule standpoint, some key meetings coming up. Our Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for next Tuesday at 7 o'clock at Northampton Township. And then we have a zoning hearing board coming up the 10th of October. We have to go to the zoning board because the impervious surface of the project exceeds the allowable amount by a small chunk. So we're going to go to zoning and ask for relief from that. And then if we get that approval on the 10th, we'll go back the next night on the 11th of October and ask for final approval from the Planning Commission. Unless we're lucky enough on the 13th to ask for conditional approval based on the zoning hearing board outcome, and then we don't have to go back. So we'll try that. I don't know if we'll be successful, but that's what we're going to shoot for. The design development drawings will come to us in November. I'll review that at the November 10th Finance Committee meeting. The Board of Supervisors in the 16th of November is when we'll go back and ask for final approval of the project from the township. And the Act 34 process starts on the 17th of November when we advertise it, and the 20-day waiting period, and then the hearing on the 15th of December. And ultimately, we'll receive bids in February and be back in front of you to review those numbers, including the alternates for the 5 classrooms and the 10 classrooms, to see, you know, what might be considered, what might be favorable, and we can make a decision based on real numbers. So this is the Act 34 hearing process. So I think we've gone through this before, but just to refresh you on this, we'll look for board approval of the advertisement on the 17th of November, and then we'll be back in front of you on the 15th. So Andy and I were talking. You had asked for an update on the history of the projects at Council Rock since 2010, which is what I can speak to anyway, from that point to today. So we accomplished a lot together as a team, really good stuff. So I would say Churchill Elementary School was when I came on board and kind of acquired that project in 2010. Holland Elementary School then came along in 2013 when I worked with Andy and met Andy for the first time. We worked together, had a really nice project. It was moving along. COVID challenged it a bit, but we moved in just a couple months beyond what we anticipated. We were very fortunate to keep that moving. That was 2020. New Start Center finished in 21, and Hillcrest additions and renovations are mostly finished, with the exception of some things we're still waiting for because of procurement challenges. But we are in pretty good shape there. The projects currently in construction or in planning, so Feinstein Elementary School is in progress, scheduled to complete through all the phases in the fall of 24. And Richboro Elementary School additions and renovations is in the design phase, approval phases we just talked about. And pending the board approves that, that would wrap up in 24 at the same time so Feinstein wraps up. And then all the buildings will be air conditioned at that point.
Can I stop you there for a second and see if there's any questions anybody has? One thing I wanted that came up in a was the rationale behind the ordering? You would know better than anybody since you've been here since 2012, and you've done a great job with categorizing and putting things in priority lists over the years. Is that kind of, that list that you showed, it's in slide 12, has pretty much been something that, the way in the order in which you've done it was based on need, age of the buildings, certain things, that's kind of, it hasn't changed much from the original plan.
That's right, yeah. So the buildings that we're finishing now, that are still planned, are the buildings that completed more, later than those. So we're looking at the 1989 and 88 buildings that we're touching now. The buildings that we did, a lot of those buildings were 1960s, 1970s buildings. So as we work on the Hillcrest and Richboro, those were 1989 buildings. So, and Newtown around the same. Newtown's a couple years newer.
92 or 94.
Yeah, so that's why Newtown was last of those three schools, because those are a little bit older. And then, well, we can move to that because it's a good segue. So the next project's planned, and I wouldn't say these are the last projects, these are just the next projects, right? Because it's just a continuous loop over time, going back through these and touching them over and over, hopefully not as much as the last time. But, and that's an example of Hillcrest, Richboro, and Newtown. We're not going in those and tearing all the walls out as we did in a lot of those other projects, because they're appropriately sized classrooms, the corridors are appropriately sized. We have spaces that meet today's standards, where a lot of those other buildings, we had to go in and take a lot of walls out. Solfeiston is a good example, because there's a lot of classrooms that are 700 square feet, 750, and we're looking for a classroom that's around 850 square feet normally. So thus the addition, 13 classroom addition, but we only gained 5 classrooms because we had to make classrooms in size more appropriately sized, which displaced classrooms to that addition. That's why the net's only 5. But all the classrooms inside will now be appropriately sized by today's standards. So next in queue would be Newtown Elementary School, and these were just dates that were in the capital plan that we were carrying. 2028 is just a placeholder to give it a date. It doesn't mean that is the date. Welsh Elementary School additions and renovations, 2030. And then the high schools are beyond 30, they're 32-ish. There's a lot of work all at once, a lot of financing, and I'm sure Bob, why that'll be a challenge to try to accomplish all that. But as far as the elementary schools, the next ones to go touch are the Newtown Elementary and Welsh Elementary. Welsh was built in 90-ish. It's about 30, yeah, because it'll be 30 years old if you touch it in 2030. So you think of it as a newer elementary school, but time has flown by. Just like South, 2002, it was 20 years old.
So you won't have to overhaul it like you did. As I was saying, oh my God, Welsh is in good shape, but it'll just need the updates.
Well, it'll be like an infrastructure, exterior finish, windows, that kind of thing. It won't be a total, demolish interior walls and things. The challenge with Welch and Newtown is that you really won't have a swing school for those. So in the budgets that were prepared in the book, they include temporary classrooms to do the renovations with an occupied building, because you won't have the ability to move people into a swing school for those projects.
Mr. Tate?
With the renovations in occupied buildings, does that mean that they're generally 2 years instead of 1?
Yes. Yeah, that's a year of construction. So the other project that that I didn't talk about was the vacated Richboro Middle School. So around 2025, we would expect that will be vacated. If the plan sticks where you consider doing work in this building over a summer and maybe consider using that building for admin so that you can, more efficiently take care of the things that need to be done here, it would be a cost-effective approach. But if it can't be, you have to look at phasing around this building in a way that will add some time and cost to the project. But it's an opportunity to consider. That building is absolutely tired. We're just band-aided and limping and just need to keep it alive a little bit longer. maintenance team has done a really nice job keeping that building going. So other projects that are planned or have happened, the North Turf also happened in 2020, we replaced the turf. So in 2030, that needs to be considered for turf. South Stadium construction, phase 1 was completed in 2021. Will there be a South Stadium phase 2? It's to be determined, but that's on the list. And the South Tennis Court restoration is planned for 2023 as part of the capital improvement projects. It's in the book as part of the 5-year plan. So that's not a borrow from other monies. It's considered part of those monies for that project. So that's kind of a history of where the district's been in the last 12 years. Done well, right? Board agenda items. These were discussed last meeting. Just to remind you, they'll be on the consent agenda items, the services we need for the Richboro Elementary School. They're in the project budget. They're not additional monies. They're part of that overall budget. And the other consent agenda item that will be included is the change order for North for the extra coatings that we did, that we talked about, that were discussed last month. That's it for me. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to.
Any questions from the board?
Doug, last night, Dr. Sanko hosted a parent forum over at Richboro Elementary School. Several board members attended. One of the parents ratted me about the retaining wall, how it's not eye-pleasing, and the kids sled on it in the wintertime. I mean, there's really no other option for that retaining area back there that was looked at by Schrader or whoever. I mean, what you proposed, or at least in the schematic, looks like a hardscape material along those lines.
Yeah.
So can you just explain to how you got to that point and not something that's more eye-pleasing or not so cement-looking?
Well,
if you can.
It wanted to be cement-looking initially, right? Somebody said, we'll just put a concrete retaining wall in, and we'll retain the earth, and we'll put a guard or railing up, and that'll be our retaining wall. And looking out the back windows of the school into a concrete retaining wall would be pretty unsightly. So we said, why don't we go with a hardscape wall, which are more natural feeling, large, stackable, segmented walls that go in place. They don't feel nearly as harsh. There's color options, so they won't be stark white, like concrete. And they're actually, it's stepped so that there is a planter in the lower level. So there is going to be landscaping within that wall. So it's a two-tiered wall. So it's a lower level with mulch and trees, and then it steps up again into the other half of the wall. And then there is a ornamental railing up top to keep anyone from going over into the mulch. And further up the hill, adjacent to the soccer field, is some vinyl coated chain link fence, so that anybody that's sledding across the top, or think about if they're on a snowmobile or anything coming toward that, will know that they go around it. Once they go around it, they're no longer facing that retaining wall. So we had two efforts to keep people from going over the retaining wall.
Okay. I couldn't answer that question in full clarity, so thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Hickey.
I asked this to you before, but I'll just ask it for the public's knowledge again. Someone had mentioned to me about, do we have to provide handicap access to the fields up top from the school?
So we don't currently, the district doesn't currently. However, it would take about it's like a 700-foot length of ramp, I think, by the time you would meet today's current code to get to the top. But there is if you go through the adjacent neighborhood, there is a street that comes right into the top of that field, flush with the field, that would allow ADA accessibility by parking in that neighborhood and coming right over onto the fields. So there is another location you can access the fields that isn't from the bottom, which would be far more cost effective than trying to construct a ramp. We did look at the ramp. It was literally.
Well, yeah, it's about
It's a steep hill.
it's a foot in length for
I'm one of the
inch
sledders
rise.
that go, I'm one of the sled down there.
So that hill is probably 20 feet high, and you've got an inch. Every inch, you need a foot.
And the other point, you shared that question with me, Bob, and the other point that you made previously, Doug, was that all of the playground, play areas, and playing fields are on the school level.
Yes.
So it's not like ADA access is needed to access playground.
Right. The school functions are generally down at the lower level of the site.
Yeah. Good.
That's a good point.
Thanks.
Dr. Thorwald?
If I may, I mean, the school doesn't use those upper fields. The school doesn't use those upper fields. Cruiser does. The school does not. So, and that's why, you know, it's kind of out of. Back to the retaining wall, Doug, I mean, I'm looking at that site. To the right of the building, as you look to the front, is a drainage basin. You can't go out the right. To the left, we don't own very far. You can't go out the left. And the design specs for the building are to go out the back. So, I mean, I think it's a very creative way that you came up with. And it's the only way we can actually add anything to that school in terms of additional classrooms, because both design and just the nature of where the building was plopped on our plot of land.
And depending on, and I thank you, depending on how, what you do as far as 5 or 10 classrooms, if it's 5 classrooms, you get a lot more grass area. And you're not as close to the wall as you are with 10. So it's actually not a bad view. If you remember from the rendering, you can see some grass. It doesn't feel too bad. You're not going to be looking, it's not like you're going to be, you know, looking out of a high rise into another high rise. It's not that feeling at all. It's definitely going to, it's going to feel more open. You'll be able to see up and see blue sky, not just wall, by stepping it the way it needs to be stepped.
Anybody else for Doug? Dr. Sanko suggested that I open it up to the members of the public if they wanted to ask about Richboro Elementary School. If you have any questions, if not, we'll move on.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
No, I just can't.
You might say that.
No,
be
just
fair.
so
There's no-
before Doug leaves, I
Yes.
wanted to make sure if there
I
are any
would say I didn't
questions.
get that, I didn't get that thought of anything, of the aesthetics of the retaining wall. I thought it was nice. And you will see, as you said, the sky. It's a 20-foot wall. I mean,
It's pretty hot, yeah.
but we're not up against it. You're going to see a view.
Yeah, a good distance away.
And I didn't think about the sledding. There is other areas to sled. It's not just that one spot. So it's a pretty big hill. Okay, if there's nothing else. Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Moving on. We could, Bob Reinhardt's going to do Richboro Elementary School finance update.
I'm going to hand these out, and I have pens here also, because a little of this, you're going to feel like you're in school again, I guess, because I'm going to be explaining to you how we develop the debt service. And I think you're going to get a better understanding of when you hear some of the terms, and you can picture it. So I'm going to hand this out, and I'm going to go through a slide deck, and if anyone needs a pen, just to take notes so you'd have it. Because I probably picked some things up, and I'm going to highlight, there might be some other things that we talk about that you guys would also like to write down. Thanks for having me back. I didn't think when I left I'd ever be back in the game again. Thanks for having me back. I think I promised that to some people. But I'm going to go forward with this. I'm going to talk about some terms and some thought process and just things, and then we're going to develop what I'm talking about with some graphs and things like that. And board members that have been with me before are going to look at these pages and say, man, I remember these 10 years ago. And yeah, it's the same thinking that Bob Reinhardt has as he looks at these things. So everything I have in here are real numbers, and the graphs have been developed based on information I received from public financial management and real numbers of today's world. So understand this is not something that it's just illustrative purposes or anything like that. This is really where we are in today's world. Okay. District's financial resources. First thing you have to think about is the project. Okay. Doug's talked, and today I'm going to use the project cost, and it may be high, it may be low, but it's everything I'm showing you here with new money is about $35.5 million. By the end of this, we may end up saying, oh, we're not going to need that much, or we can delay some of the debt service and things like that, but maybe not. So I'm showing you a large number, I would believe. The other thing that you should think about, and it's very different from when I worked, interest rates were very low when I was here. In fact, when we invested money, we couldn't invest the money to even have arbitrage. Arbitrage is the difference between the interest rate you pay on your bonds and the rate you can earn in the bank. I will tell you, the IRS is really tight on local governments because we used to borrow a lot of money and we used to bank it and we make the difference, and the spread would be helpful for the district. They came back and said, no more of that, and now you're going to hear about arbitrage rebate and things like that, where we have to pay money back to the IRS if we don't do things properly. I will tell you, when you think about arbitrage and positive arbitrage, which we can now, the Federal Reserve is going to go up another 75 basis points. So that's short-term money. Interest rates are going up. I just bought for a friend, I bought a U.S. Treasury today for a year, and it's 3.23%. Next month, after a 75 basis point increase, it's going to be up over 4%. When we borrow money, the school district, we're in the tax-exempt marketplace. Therefore, people are willing to accept a lower interest rate because they don't have to pay taxes on the interest for their bonds. So naturally, we can borrow money at a lower cost than being a AT&T or something. AT&T, you have bond interest, you're paying taxes on that, so you have to pay more interest. So naturally, in a normal market, we'll be able to go into the taxable marketplace, get our investments, but we're borrowing at non-taxable. So it's very different today because now we can hold our money and make some money on it because we're paying less interest than what we're earning if you look at that amount of money. Big thing we should remember in the whole harvest or the safe haven that you want to talk about is the money we borrow for a project has to be consumed within the first 3 years. If we do that, we can earn money on our money, but we have to substantially use all the money within the first 3 years. If we do that, we're in good shape. If we don't do that, then you have to start worrying about paying the money back to the IRS. Okay? Go back. People may say, you may hear in the community, and this has happened to me before, hey, we got a great bank. Why don't you go for a loan rather than going for this bond issue? That is something that could be considered if it's a small project. I would say $5 million or below, something like that. You may want to borrow it. You don't have the issuance costs that you have with a bond issue, but the projects we're talking about are just too big for this. So if someone talks to you about that, think about them where we'd be borrowing in the taxable marketplace, not in the non-taxable marketplace, and they have to make the money that way. But in some circumstances, you may want to go for a bank loan. But the project we're talking about right now, it's not viable. Okay? No issuance costs, higher interest rates. Bond issue financing, larger projects, 45 million and above. Issuance costs are lower interest rates, tax-exempt market. That's what I just said. So that's why we would be in this type of marketplace. And I think that's supposed to be 5 million and above, and I bet you that I didn't hit the shift key, and that was supposed to be a dollar sign. First mistake. And I called it out, so none of you guys told me that. Go ahead. Again, everything I'm showing you tonight is if we had to borrow $35.5 million next year. Cash flow, project duration. We went through a previous cash flow with PFM. We believe the project's going to be done in 3 years, so it's safe to borrow the money at that point. Especially knowing, as Doug pointed out, this project's coming up behind us. This isn't a one-and-done project because there's a thing called bank qualified bonds, which is under $10 million, and you might want to pierce it out, and that's even lower interest rates if you can get the $10 million bond issue, and then you can have 5-year calls and things like that are also advantageous because trust departments that buy those bonds and it doesn't go out to the public. But that isn't something that we should really be considering for this borrowing. Our current budget for debt service in this year's budget is 18,766,401. Very important number. That's where the teeter-totter goes back and forth, and once we exceed that, that's when we talk about tax increases, we talk about capitalized interest, or we talk about district's financial reserves, meaning that we cannot afford it to protect, or we have to do something with it if our debt service goes above that. And we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about this and showing you how everything works. Right now, this number is very important. As of June 30, 2022, I believe, and I got to tell you, the audit wasn't done yet, but we have about $2.8 million in our debt service fund. Just like the capital reserve fund or the capital projects fund, the debt service fund is what it says. It's for future debt service. We can use this money. The money gets transferred from the general fund, or if you do capitalized interest, we can get into that if you want. It gets into that fund, and then you pay out of that fund. You don't have to use general fund dollars to do that. You have reserves here to pay for stuff. So that's a very important number there. Does everyone get that? You're going to see that in the future of my discussion. Okay, go ahead. Okay, is that number familiar with you? Look at this is going out for, I think that's 23 years. And all I'm saying is, if we keep our budget at that level, you're not going to be asking people for more money. We're not going to have to do anything like that. We're not going to need more resources to do that. As long as we spend at that level or below that level. Okay? So that's our starting point. Once we go over that, that's when we have to say, can we afford this? We have to do capitalized interest, which we've done in the past. And capitalized interest is something that I'm not a fan of. So you probably remember that was when I was leaving, when I was saying, well, I don't want to do that. But anyway, that's where we start at. Okay? Let's go to the next one. This, now, is what our borrowing is right now. So these are the years, and this is how much debt service we have today compared to the budget. Okay? And understand, as long as we don't go above the budget, we don't have to worry about it. If we go above the budget, we better have resources to pay for it outside of the general fund. Does everyone get that? Okay, go ahead. There we go. We have 2 years right now where our debt service is above our budget. This is a very important graph, okay? So remember the debt service fund, 2.7 million? Right now, we're going to use 207,000 of that this current year, and then 367,000 next year, okay? So about $500,000, $600,000 is committed of that 2.7 million. Does everyone get that? Okay? Then, this is important when you have projects going on. The blue is good. Okay? What we want to do is be able to efficiently layer future debt into these areas. Okay? When I worked here in 2010, when we started these projects, life was great when you look at just this area of the budget. Our debt service was dropping off quickly. Interest rates were under percent for a lot of what we were doing. And we had old bond issues that we could refinance. And if you remember, we were taking these savings and we were just cutting into debt because we were able to save money, and we just kept cutting back, and giving more room for more debt to add on. So when you look at it, this community will look at it and say, wow, you did $300 million of projects, or whatever that number was, and you didn't raise our taxes. Today is a different world, okay? That is not the situation now. It's more costly to do projects now. Doug's going to talk to you about inflation, and no one wants to take these projects without inflation going up. I'm talking to you about interest rates are going up, and they're going to continue to go up. All this stuff is not we were on easy street back then. Doug would tell you that there was, 7 general contractors bidding on our jobs because they all wanted to work. There was competition and all that. Now you're not seeing any of that stuff. They're rejecting a bid because no one wanted to do the work. So now the new bids, none of the local people were bidding it. Now everybody's looking at it and saying, oh, this project, no one has interest in it. I'm going to make some money on this project. That's what I do it as, but I think it's great. So anyway, here it is. Everyone understands what I'm showing there. And do you understand what happens there? Okay, let's go to the next slide. What I've done now is PFM came to me and said, okay, for you to have $35.5 million in proceeds to be able to fund this project, that was my number I gave them, here's your debt service. This is just looking at our new debt service alone, and I colored it in and shaded it between interest and principal, okay? If you look at this interest, only the gray is interest. Don't think that interest underlies that. That's just on top of the principal. Also, in these years, it doesn't show up like we're paying any principal. It's because we're only paying $5,000 each of those years for the bonds. So what they're trying to do is, we have no space in those years. Remember the years where we had too much debt service already? So we're trying to limit this debt service, so we're not paying any principal off, or hardly any principal off. You have to pay $5,000 of bonds every year, or you can't do the bond issue. But think about this. We have about $35 million of bonds. Look at all that interest, because that's all we're paying. It's almost like your mortgage at your house. You hardly have any principal coming out of that first, and you're paying all kinds of interest. Well, that's the same thing here. This is very important to remember, because we'd love to make everything and push everything off to the end so everything fits in and you don't have any tax effect. But you can't, because the interest is so big a portion of the cost of your bonds. Also, when you think about this, I'm just going to use this as an example. Let's say this is equal to 3.5%, blended rate of 3.5%. Back in 2010, this is probably 1.25%. So this line was down here. Do you understand the concepts there then? How the numbers change? Next slide. That last projection was based on 23-year debt. And you're going to say, why did you pick out 23 years? You're going to see that all the other debt in our portfolio ends at 23. So if we had no other bond issues, you'd all probably say, yeah, let's shorten it up and let's keep it at 23 years. It makes sense. This is going out 30 years, and we wouldn't want to go out beyond 30 years. And I'm going to show you reasons why you might want to go out 30 years rather than 23 years. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Which plan is best? It depends. I will tell you, if you didn't have any capital projects backing up this one, I'd tell you go as short as you can, because when you look at it, short here, for a 23-year duration, we're going to pay total cost of $67 million. Going 30 years, we're going to pay $84 million in costs. You see, that's huge, right? Provides capacity for future borrowing, provides some, I'm going to show you that. Provides most by going 30 years. Impact on future borrowings, if you go 23 years and you want to borrow more money, you're going to be putting all your principal at the end because you're going to have no capacity, or not much capacity, to be able to fill in unless you're going to raise taxes a lot. And then less costly for future borrowings. Meaning that although this costs more, this costs less, if you're going to borrow more, it's going to turn around, and the next borrowing is going to be a lot more if you do it this way, and less if you do it this way. Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Okay, this is the 23-year debt service. Now, this is where it comes to, what's it costing us, can we afford this? Remember, the debt service or the interest on the debt service is so high at the beginning, and we're not using hardly any principal here, but it is driving the cost up. So for the year 23-24, we'd be paying about $2.5 million more than what's in our current budget. In addition to, before, we also had this year that we have to pay for the existing debt. So altogether, it's about $2.7 million that we are going to need. What numbers in the debt service fund did I tell you? 2.7 million. Okay, I'm not telling you we should stop at contributing to that, because when we have money, that's just a place you should put it to plan for the future, because you may need more money in future borrowings. But since this is 23, you see how shallow this is here? All the way through this, where you don't have much blue to be able to put additional dollars there for debt service. So remember when I said it's going to cost more if you go for 23 years? All your principal is going to be out here, so you're going to be paying a lot of interest through this period of time because you can't retire any debt. So you remember this piece costs 67 million, but if you put something on top of here, it's going to cost a lot more. That's why you have to look beyond and just say, oh, this is going to cost me cheaper, let's do it. Go to the next slide. Okay. This is the other slide. It's costing us slightly more, about $60,000, $70,000 more debt service that time. But you'll see that you have more room in here to put other debt in, and it's going to cost less because you're retiring bonds in here that you wouldn't be able to otherwise. You understand that? You guys get it?
Good question.
Go ahead.
Our next project, I think Doug said, would have been 2028 after this. So we've got a 5-year window. In that 5-year window, and then I don't see a whole lot of borrowing capacity delta between these two scenarios in those 5-year windows. And maybe I just can't read the graphs because they're small.
And I will tell you, this graph is a little skewed compared to, I don't have these exactly proportionate, so it is going to be a little more difficult to see that. I will tell you, these first years, I don't think you can do anything that's going to be good, just because it's so tight already. So, but it's going to give you more room here, here, and here, where you can start filling in. I'm just showing that. We can still do 23. I'm just showing you maybe 30 is better. We don't want to go beyond 30. I mean, some districts might go out longer. Don't go out longer. Your buildings, Doug's talking about 30 years. You want to.
Well, that was my other question. When will we have to do it again? If we borrow 30 years? Yes.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah.
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 It becomes a continuous.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what questions do you have for me in regard to this? Does this make sense to you, or does it not make sense to you? Do you think I'm missing something? We can get into premium bonds, and we can get into all kinds of stuff that I'm not going to get into tonight, but because it means the same concepts are here. It's just, we can talk about that. But
I have a question if no one else wants to
I
go
can tell
first.
you it's a question.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I think the concern that I've got is what Dr. Thor was articulating a minute ago, that effectively Doug's rolling clock is 25 to 30 years for a building. We've got the end, so we've got that period. But this also is assuming that our budget remains flat.
Our debt service
Our debt
budget
service
remains
budget
flat.
remains
Yes.
flat, right.
We can always put it in tax increases if you'd like.
And
That's the thing that
that's
you
what I'm
guys can
talking
say,
about.
I'm comfortable doing that.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's my question.
Go ahead.
We did raise taxes a few years in the past, 5. How does that not affect the debt service, or do you have to categorize the tax increase in a way that it would affect the debt service? Because we have made tax increases.
You mean for debt service?
No, I'm
So, yeah,
saying, you
yeah.
have to do,
Yeah.
it has to be specific tax
No.
increase for the debt service.
It's just that if you went to the budget, and next year I put in $20 million in debt service, and you come back to me and say, why do we have a tax increase? I'd be showing you, I put in $1.4 million of debt service, and that's the cause of the tax increase. If I don't put any extra money in and we raise taxes, and I'm not going to come to you and say, I didn't put any money in debt service, it's just not going to be on the list. So that's why I'm saying this is the break-even point here. You understand what I'm saying?
Right, does that align with Newtown, going back to Newtown and Welsh from like 2028, that we think that like, I mean, looking at your time frame, and of course you said it's in the, okay, so you don't have to answer that.
I would defer.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is he put in a list of projected dates, and they're just dates, you know. Doesn't mean we have to do full-blown projects either, but at some point, because the north is going to be such a big, and south is going to be such very big and expensive, especially north projects, maybe we have to look at increasing debt service at some point, you know, as part of the long-term plan.
Yes, I will tell you that there will be opportunities that you're going to have refundings. And I'll explain why there's refundings. The bond that was a 30-year bond in 2025, when it was originally sold, it was a 30-year bond. Interest rates staying stable, it was the same interest rate environment. That is no longer a 30-year bond, it's a 5-year bond. So now, if you think of it, you could call that bond in at 30-year rates, which are higher, and now you can sell a bond for a 5-year rate, and that spread is a refunding. And that's very simple terms, but that's what we do when we do big, large refundings. So, when I first got into this business, when you did a refunding with the school district, you said, I want all the savings up front. So it would go into your fund balance and you have a good year and everything. When we got here in Council Rock and we had all this borrowing to do, we were saying, wait a minute, we're not taking it up front. We're going to take it in the years we need it to start reducing this existing fund balance. So that's going to be a strategy that you guys really got to look at and say, hey, let's reduce this as far as we can. Don't take the money up front. Take it later so that's going to give you more capacity, if you will. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Strategy.
So that's one thing I would tell you that we don't know. If anything, I'll tell you this is probably going to be lower. And I'm hoping that PFM's estimates today are a little higher than the numbers come in. There's been a lot of talk about our credit rating. And I've heard that's from around that our credit rating and our credit rating. And I will tell you that our credit rating is AA, very good credit rating. And I hear some people talk about, well, we should raise all our reserves and all this other stuff to try to get a higher credit rating. I don't know what you think a higher credit rating is going to do, because I'm not sure that going to an A+ is going to save you $1 million on your debt service. But I will tell you as a business manager, and Mike, I'm sure you and I talked about this, that I used to be going crazy because we would do our bond issues competitively online. So we would go on the internet. And I'd sit there for 2 hours watching the bids come in and how competitive it was. I've never been in a district that had bond issues nearly as competitive as Council Rock. Our paper, as you'll call it, bonds, are very noteworthy. I was at Penridge, I believe we had a AA rating. I didn't get that interest at Penridge. But I got to tell you, the name of this district is good in the investment marketplace. So you guys should just make sure it stays good. It probably has something to do with our education and, the people here and all that. But I think our credit rating is great. We're doing good things financially. And this thing about, getting a higher credit rating, I'm not sure you need to worry about that so much. And maybe you should come in and sit at this next auction when we do this, and I hope it's as good as the ones I saw. Don't you remember me going crazy all the time about
I
the
do.
stuff that went on? I mean,
Yeah.
what happened, well, I don't have to get into it all the way, but it keeps it getting extended when someone beats another person. And it was extended for like an hour and a half because people kept beating each other. And that's after the first half hour that no one bit too much and everyone thought, oh, he got it. And then someone comes in at the last second and it just kept going every 10 minutes. So we have a very good bond rating and people in the market like us. But
So can you go back and say if we follow this model, we're not going to be able to do anything in the next few years? Isn't that what you said? What do you mean by that? Be able to do what?
what's going to happen here is you see how limited that space is there? People talked about tax increases, people talked about doing other things. We're going to either need more reserves to be able to do more issues, because there's going to be things here. We're going to have to do capitalized interest, which we've done before. Let me explain what capitalized interest is. Does everyone know what capitalized interest is? What happens is, just like here, you see this spike? This spike was pretty good, I think, for the Soul Feinstein thing. So we didn't use our money to fund that. What we did is we went out for a bond issue. We took our bond issue, let's say the project was a $32 million bond issue. We took the $32 million, plus we took probably 6 or 7 million. In addition to that, about $39 million. And instead of using $7 million of it for the project, we used $7 million to pay this back. You see what I'm saying? So we used proceeds to pay that spike up there back.
Borrow the interest.
Yes, that's why it's called capitalized interest. And that's when, well, you guys probably didn't know everything, but I was against all of that at the time. When I
You weren't
was,
alone, Bob.
what's that?
You weren't alone.
Okay. So anyway, that's what capitalized interest is. You need to have to do that, or maybe raise taxes, or interest rates are going to go down. And if interest rates go down, you're going to have a lot of refinancings that really can take chunks out of this. You just got to make sure that they're not throwing all the savings up front. You got to spread it out in the years you need it. And PFM knows how to do that, and I'm sure they'll do that.
So, but in some ways, this ties our hands, because if something comes up and we need to do something that is not right now in the plan, what do we do? Like, for example, I know where I've read this before, a lot of people are asking for full-day kindergarten. This is not budgeted, and something we need to look into it at some point. And according to this plan, we cannot do it because we're not going to have any money, or a way to borrow it.
Right. You have a way, and that would be raising taxes to be able to borrow money. You have significant reserves. So understand that you have money in the general fund. The 2021 had a total fund balance of about almost $33 million. 14.7 million of that was the COVID contingency. Unassigned was 12.5 million. So there's money if you guys would choose to want to do one-time things. One-time things. Don't do it for continued operations, because, you know, once that's gone, you know, you have to raise taxes or cut programs or something, because it's reoccurring costs. So you could do that.
I mean, a full day kindergarten has a recurring cost, because you have to pay
Teachers and everything.
the teachers, right?
That would cause the budget to go up. It's also the facilities. My understanding is we have to add a lot of facilities. So it's ongoing costs plus capital costs to do that. It would be very expensive.
We're not going to borrow to borrow it for kindergarten. It's an ongoing thing. You wouldn't borrow it. You would have to find constant revenue, raising taxes to do that, or cut costs somewhere.
Hey, Bob. I just had a quick question because you brought up the reserves. So obviously, prior to now, we always were looking at our fund balance. We were worried about it. Thankfully, it's higher now. Does that change just any strategies we should think of, or any ways of like looking at that little shallow area in terms of financing, or do you think that it's just better to look at, the 23 or 30-year plans?
I have some thoughts that I don't know that I'm ready to talk about publicly. I think that's something for Andy and I to talk about, and board leadership and all that, just because there's just things I shouldn't talk about right now.
That's
But
perfect.
of course, I have ideas in my mind on things that we could do.
I'm glad to hear that you have this idea. So we'll talk about that later on. Thank you.
Something else was up.
I got another one. Bob?
She basically answered my question, but I do want to say, like I said, no offense, the term is, this is all Greek to me.
Sorry.
So, no. So I appreciate, I said.
That's an inside joke. Go ahead.
No, it's a compliment.
Right.
Yeah.
So I appreciate this, I would like to maybe someday have my own little sit down so I understand it more, but my question was the same as Kristen's, so I'll defer. But thank you, I really appreciate it.
Could you go over some of the positives and negatives of maybe reducing the amount of our debt service at some point, and if you believe that's a positive or negative with respect to some of the concepts that you've been talking about?
Wow.
That's what you were expecting.
First of all, my belief is not that you do a project because of debt service. So you don't put debt service out front. Debt service is a tool once you say this is a project we need to get done. And then to manage debt service is what I think you need to do next. That's what I'm showing you here. And the financial or fiscal realities are what they are, and this is what we deal with. You would have loved to have been here in 2010 because everything was golden. I mean, all these issues that you see, they weren't there.
Yeah.
So this is a different environment now. But can we afford this? Yes. And if the project is something that needs to be done, it shouldn't be delayed. I showed you how to do that, and you may look at 2.7 million. That's a blip. We already funded some of that, and when I look at our reserves, we can fund some more. And I don't even know what happened this year yet, but Mike, you remember that every year, just conservative budgeting, our budget's $250 million. You're off by 1%, that creates $2.5 million. That's our revenues, and then expenditures, the same thing, that creates another $2.5 million. Can we do this? Yes, we can. Do you want to worry about the future? I think we plan for it, and I think we prepare the best we can with what we have now. I'm hoping that when the numbers come back, this green is a little lower than we thought it was.
Right. Dr. Thorwald.
Bob, first of all, thank you for these charts. I missed them. This really lays it out. Just a comment for the board and for the public. That blue horizontal line, that's 1/14th, 1/15th of our budget. Our budget's 15 times bigger than that. This is just the car payment, so to speak, or the house payment. Our operating budget is, on top of that, another
$260 million.
Yeah, $240 million a year. That's how we fund recurring stuff. We can, if we need to, move that horizontal line up and down. It's a budgeting process, if we need to. I know everybody's fixated on that little skinny part of the blue for 4 years in there at the first shelf. But we just heard, we don't really have anything to do in those 4 or 5 years. There's nothing capital to do. Right. If we needed to do something, we have reserve and we can raise that level. But planning it out, as soon as we drop off that shelf, you're in a decent borrowing. I wish there was more wiggle room in there. And if interest rates
Let's show you everything we did with it to get it there.
Yeah, and if interest rates drop in the next 5 years, which,
We're
recession.
going to have a lot to refinance. And I
We're
got
going to have we can drop those shelves too. So please don't. there is a 4 or 5 year gap window there where we don't plan on doing anything significant. So it actually works to our advantage that that's where it is. That spike above our debt service, I mean, that's a perfect place to spend down a little bit of fund balance, to level it out. It's a one-time cost, and it doesn't hurt the taxpayers or any, it actually helps the taxpayers. We took in too much money, that's a good way to, you have to work that out, internally and stuff. But, yeah, I mean, from a capital standpoint, this is about as good as it's going to get in this environment. I mean,
Interest rates are going up.
yeah, so this isn't bad. It isn't great, but it isn't bad, so.
I've seen a lot better.
Yeah.
Mr. Solomon?
I would just like to piggyback on that. We have a responsibility to those folks in Richboro that have been sitting there since 1989 without air conditioning. We have taken care of every other school, and we can afford this. Is it going to be tight? It's going to be tight. But as I mentioned when we approved the budget, and Dr. Sanko, I'll remind you of this, I want to see a review of our programs and our curriculum as part of the budgeting process moving forward. Full-day kindergarten is a great one, but we can't afford it, and can we logistically do it? And that's something that I think that's a larger discussion for a later time. Much like Soul Finestone, much like Hillcrest, Richboro does not have air conditioning. And I sat through that meeting last night, listening to parents that are paying taxes like everybody else in the district. This man says we can do it. I think we do it. The issue becomes the back end. How can we work our budget numbers down? What can we do better? There's schools and districts around us that don't have the luxury of Council Rock schools. We should be very thankful for the business that Doug and the team has put together over these years. But that's the cost of running the district. This is also a worst case scenario, depending on
Well, interest rates right now?
No, I'm talking about, do we need 5 additional classrooms? Do we need 10 additional classrooms? That's a larger conversation with enrollment, and we know the issues we have at Wrightstown, so, and other parts of the district. So getting Richboro online and getting them where they need to be with comparable to everybody else has to be a priority. It's a priority for me. Everything else will work itself out. That falls back on us and the administration to find those areas in the budget to tighten up. So I don't want that lost, that I still want, and I still would like to hear from the administration on that review process.
Yeah, if I,
The 35.5 million is as is or with the next?
That would be 10 classrooms according to
10
Doug's guesstimates.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's the highest one.
Which doesn't mean we have to go.
And that's if the budget's right, Doug? I mean, obviously, where you knows where that number comes from. Yeah, no pressure.
Sure.
First
Thank
you.
you.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I'll just take a little minute to echo what Mr. Salomon's saying. And my sense from the board is no one is looking for a reason not to do Richboro. I believe all of us are very committed and feel as strongly about it as you do. And what I'm seeing in the presentation, thank you so much. It's so helpful. I'm seeing here are ways to do it. I'm not hearing here are reasons not to do it. So I'm very encouraged.
Okay, Ivan.
I just want to, thank you, Mr. Tate. I just want to comment to Mr. Solomon. I want you to know we heard loud and clear that we want a program review done. We've already started looking into it. One group has already provided a proposal. We have not moved forward with bringing anything to the board, only because we have not been able to convince Bob Reinhardt to be our full-time business administrator yet.
Timestamp that.
As soon as we get somebody in place, we want to start in the business office with this program review, and we do have a proposal from at least one group.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Tate?
Thank you, Mr. Hidalgo. Thank you, Bob. This is really a neat graphic, clear to understand, the depiction of our borrowing capacity.
This is the fifth time you saw it.
It took him 5 times.
So I have a question, I have another comment, that this is based on the interest rates that we are committed to paying on bond issues we have already issued, correct?
The red is,
Yes,
the green is projected.
right.
Yes.
Yes, good. Yeah, I think what it shows is that that we as a district have been very responsible in our borrowing. We're not overextended. You talk about, the picture could be better. I think, are you referring to the fact that interest rates are going up as opposed to the way we've managed?
I'm talking about interest rates and the environment I was able to work under.
Right.
Because everything was easy.
Yeah.
It isn't easy anymore. And the questions that you all are asking are good questions. And I'd love to be able to fix the first couple of years and have more in there. And maybe it will happen if interest rates go down and we can do some refinancing. Then you're going to be able to clean up this number. At least the red's going to start going down, and that's going to be very beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really think this illustrates how well this district has managed its finances over the past 20 years. I mean, we've done all the construction projects that Doug laid out, and we're not overextended. Right now, money's tight. We can't do another school project next year and another one next year maybe, but we're in pretty good shape, all things considered. There was one question I had. When it comes to your bond debt, if interest rates went down, we would refinance. Is there a possible benefit to, in a good budget year, prepaying some bond payments to lower our interest debt service?
Let me explain how I heard that to make sure you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was garbage.
No, what I heard you say is, number one, are there bonds that can be called? Meaning, this bond was supposed to go out to 2030, but there's a call date. And as of this date, the issuer, us, can call that bond in and say, we're paying you now, you're not getting your money until 2030. And by the way, we're not going to pay you with another bond issue. We have reserves here that we want to reduce our debt with. And it's one-time expenditures, yes, we can definitely do that. You look at the Central Bucks School District. I've done some work for them recently. And you know how much they were growing for so long? They had a lot of reserves, and they just started calling bonds in. I think they probably have about $10 million in bond debt now. And look at that district and what they would do in building and stuff like that.
Wow.
Yeah. They don't have all kinds of reserves like some did. You go to Downingtown, look at Downingtown School District. If you think, we just look at like the general fund balance. Go look at them.
Well, if I could, I wanted to say thank you, Bob, for bringing this back. This method, I hope, doesn't get lost on the next business administrator. We should make sure that this way you do the debt structuring and presenting it is clear and easy. And the more it's presented and consistent, the public will understand it over time too. One question, since I have you, and we still have you as long as we have you, appreciate that we should look at maybe something, because every year the budget goes up by 2%, right? So contractually, our budgets go up every year. Taxes have to go up to keep up with that over time. And so we have the purchasing power of the 18.4 million or whatever debt ceiling is consistent in your model. So is there a way maybe to look at it differently? Because obviously in 10 years, the purchasing power, $18 million of debt service will get you almost half, of what things will cost with inflation. Is there a way to adjust the debt ceiling for, maybe a ratio to the debt? I mean, ratio to our budget, percentage of our, and not hurt things, understanding that inflation is going to eat away at this over time. 10 or 15 years, So
You can make that number anything you want. If you want it to be 19 million or 20 million, raise taxes for that, you can do it. I'm not sure how much support you're going to get to have a hollow number up there that you're not going to use right away. That's why I look at it and say, as a business manager, I love you guys to raise taxes, and I can put money in places for next year or the year after and all that. But it gets down to the nitty gritty. You guys start saying, where can we put money? You're telling me, hey, we need to reduce this tax increase. And that's why what you're saying, yes, you can do, but getting support and consistent support when the pressure's on, and you need 5 votes on that, that Thursday night before July 4th, and you need to vote. That's all I'm saying.
No, but
Yes,
that's
you
not
said
my
that.
question, of course, but my question is, in 15 years, let's see, 10 years, the budget will be $300 million.
Yep.
And we're still at $18 million of debt service, that's a, it's not gonna buy you much, it's just say 15 years, it's not buy you much, I was just wondering, and this is a great concept, but in 15 years, it may not, the 18 million, obviously, the truth is, the debt ceiling will go up for inflationary purposes, or do you think we could, I don't think we could run a school district, in 15 years at $18 million. That's just what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's so much around that for me to home in on that. There's so many ways you can manage things different than what we're doing. But it will always come down to what's the tax increases that year. And that's all I'm saying. If the board would get behind it, of course, we could do something differently. What I do think what happens usually is when there's a big project, one of the high schools or something like that, and you have enough public streaming, you're going to say, okay, we're committing 2 mills to this. And we might have to do capitalized interest, but we're going to do 2 mills for the next 3 years and build our fund balance so we can afford it. So that's what I'm used to seeing as opposed to increasing it. That's what I'm accustomed to is this project's got to get done. You're getting people from the public, and now we're trying to tell you how we can phase this in. And that's more of what I'm used to seeing. The other thing would be is if you think that's going to happen, you fund some debt service stuff to cover the first couple of years, knowing you're going to phase it in over the next 5 years. You're going up $500,000 here, $500,000 here, $500,000 here, and then you have debt service money that's going to fill it in for the 3 years that you. So there's all kinds of things you can do with that.
But I like the method because what it says is keeping us disciplined within a range.
Yeah.
I understand where you're going with it. Does anybody else want to speak?
That's one question. So, you said it was easy. I know you and I worked together for about 20 years. We don't know about easy. But it
didn't feel easy then, but now when I see this.
Successful and rewarding for sure. So my question is, I'm wrapping up the capital improvement update. It would be good if I could understand, the capital budget for the next several years, and maybe just looking out towards some of those projects so I can put together a more accurate plan when I present. Is that something we could get together on, sometime?
Probably not me, the next guy. I will tell you, I'm not putting in the hours that I need to put in here, so I'm picking and choosing the things I'm doing. So that's why I say that there's so many people saying, let's fix this, let's fix that, and I'm just trying to get my head above water every day.
I just want to avoid fixing it. Get it in the book right. So hopefully I'll give you a call, see if we can work something out. But I appreciate your good work.
Yeah, really good. Anybody else have anything on the debt service for Richboro Elementary School? Should we ask? Wait till the end. All right, we're going to move on now. Thank you, Bob Reinhardt.
Thank you.
Move on to Durham.
No, we have one thing here.
Durham.
General fund
I'm
transfer.
sorry, it's my bad. General fund transfers.
This is
Still.
This is another issue that there are some areas of the budget, of the 2022-23 budget that was not budgeted properly or not budgeted as it has been in the past. So there's about $2.1 million that we need to get money into these areas that have not been budgeted in the past, in this year's budget. We are not allowed to do any budget transfers according to state law until the last 9 months, which is in October. So you haven't seen any budget transfers for this year yet, because we can't do them until October. So what I'd like to do is you're going to see a large number of budget transfers, And some of these have one account, some of these have 50 accounts. So you're going to see a large number of budget transfers, putting money into these accounts. And go ahead to the next slide. The current budget has capital reserve transfers in that budget of $3.5 million and there's budgetary reserve of $1.2 million. I am recommending that we move money out of the capital reserve transfer into the accounts that the money is needed for operations. I will tell you, in the past, we always move money into the capital reserve for projects each year, and I'd come back to you after our audit was almost completed, and I'd say, hey, we're recommending these type of transfers, and we'd make those transfers. We never budgeted for those transfers, and we were able to do it because it's just moving from one fund to another fund. What I'm telling you is by taking this out of here does not cause us not to be able to move money for capital projects. We can still do it. We never had that number in there. In fact, I'm a little upset that I see the budgetary reserve here. You guys took that away from me in my third year.
I tried to take it away this year too.
Well, what happened is you guys realize that every year, Bob, your revenues are above by about 1%, and your expenditures are below by 1%. We don't need that there because we're just creating more fund balance. So you guys did take that away. In fact, you made me budget $3 million of fund balance every year too.
I think it was when.
Anyway, that's all kidding aside. I'm just asking you that I can take it out of that account, and I do not believe it has any operational issues by doing that.
Jason.
No, I said, it looks like this year we need to make the transfer, so it's good that we have the balance.
Yes, and we will be able to do that, yes. Yep.
So it was for a good reason that it's there.
No.
Yes.
Excuse me, this is going to sound like an uninformed question, but the capital reserve transfer,
Yes.
was that the source this summer for some of our summer projects?
It was a previous capital transfer that we paid for,
Yes.
not this one.
Yes.
Yes. This is the mechanism of taking the money from the general fund to the capital reserve fund. It was 2 years ago where we moved the money, 2021, to put it in there for these projects now. This money would be for next year's summer projects.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's what I'm driving at. So that's 3.5 million that I would love to see going into summer projects next summer.
And it still will.
This is just budgeted,
This is-
it's set surplus.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're able to do it without a budget, out of surplus to move to another fund.
Because this is from 2022, 23.
Yes, but even in 22, 23, June 30, 23, we're going to be able to move money over to the capital reserve from the general fund, even if that's not there.
Okay, so we have been funding summer projects from the prior,
Yes.
from the new year's budget.
The old year's budget. I think, I could be wrong. I thought we had like $5 million right now in the capital reserve for the projects we're doing now. That
That's-
wasn't from 22. We
That's-
haven't moved any money yet in 22 because the audit's not done and I don't even know what the fund balance is yet. There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, the 5 million is the figure I recall.
Okay,
So which budget year is that from?
that is an accumulation from the 2021 budget and before.
Right, good.
So, yeah,
Good.
so it isn't all from the, it might have been, but I don't remember. We moved different stuff.
Yeah, we can talk about it later, I'm just, expressing my concern that we have it set aside for the summer projects, that's all.
Yes, and we can still have that.
Okay.
We don't need a budget there to be able to move it. We just need surplus at the end of the year.
Okay.
And there's no reason for me to believe we're not going to have a surplus. I haven't seen anything to say, warning to say I think there's a problem.
Oh, that's all we need to hear.
Okay.
Can you go back to that? This is the first time ever $3.5 million's been in the budget.
True.
I know.
Okay,
Yeah,
can you go back?
That's the place to take it.
Let's stare at it too long, Bob. You'll get angry about it.
Thanks.
Bob, that was, go back, please. During our review, is that your review of the budget? That you
Yes.
found this areas that were not financed,
Right.
or funded? Is there anything else out there that we think might show up? Are you confident that?
I haven't been here for 3 years, and I'm getting caught up, well, not caught up, but starting to understand things. In 3 years, I don't feel like I can touch and feel things like before. I could pretty much know what's going on. I don't feel that way right now, so I can't say for sure.
And you're working part-time, Bob. In your defense, you're working part-time. So,
Well, that was the plan, but.
Oh, no, that's gonna happen.
Well, thank you for finding that. We need to include money there, without a doubt.
Okay,
Is that it?
this is my night out.
Any other questions for Bob?
Thanks, Bob.
There's a Thursday night football game here.
I know, I
Just
can't
gonna
wait to
get
get there and watch it.
Thanks, Bob.
Take care, you guys.
Oh,
Thank you.
Take care, Bob. All right, next up on the agenda is transportation, Mr. Sagan.
Yeah, thanks. So I want to thank John Ziegler and Bob Scarpa for joining us from Durham. We have been in regular, I would say, daily contact with Durham, and felt it was important for Durham to come out tonight to give us an update on our busing and transporting of students to and from school. So Bob and John, thanks for being here.
Good evening, everybody, and thanks for having us. So the first slide is just kind of an overview of what we'll share tonight. Our staffing, our routes, talk a little bit about the app, and then review the first several days. So I'll let Bob talk about our driver staffing, kind of an overview of where we're at, where we're heading.
So currently, we have 110 drivers on our payroll. 103 of those are available to us. There's a little bit of a typo here. There should be 3 due back on 9/12 due to, those are incumbent drivers that we actually hired but weren't able to work for us yet due to situations that happened at our predecessors, whether it be compensation or disability. They are now back, will be back in place on the 12th. We have 2 people out of COVID currently will be back on the 12th as well. And we have 1 medical issue that will be back and 1 that's out indefinitely with blood pressure issues, so we're dealing with that. So come Monday, Tuesday, one of the people who are due back on the 12th is a little bit of a shaky situation. That person will potentially be back on the 13th. Sometime during next week, we'll have 6 of the 7 people back, which will take our number up to 109 on 110 that we currently have hired. We have 3 dispatchers who do have their CDLs in an emergency. We can put on the road. The issue with that is we leave a little bit of a gap there, and we're able to deal with situations that arise in the office and with drivers. We have 10 monitors. Actually, that number went up to 11 today. We hired 1 today. Monitors. So we have 2 cover monitors. Our pipeline right now is very strong. Well, I shouldn't say very strong. It's decent. We've got 15 people in our pipeline. 2 are behind the wheel. 1 of them is scheduled to be tested, state tested, next week, the end of next week, and then the other one hopefully the following week. So 2 more people. We have another 13 people in various stages of background, whether it be DOT physicals or just a background check on their work background or background history for criminal background. So another 13 people there. We are bringing in, next week we've got our local recruiter coming in because we have a strong pipeline in Indeed and in our Taleo application process that because of the first 6 days, 7 days of school have kind of taken a back seat to us being able to get up and running. So there is some light at the end of the tunnel as far as staffing is concerned. It hasn't come as quickly as we would have liked it to come, but it's a competitive area, right? We've got a lot of things in place. We've got up there, our sign-on bonus of $3,000 for CDL fully credentialed drivers, $1,000 for people that a new driver that we have to train. We also have a $500 referral bonus for current drivers in place. So we should start to see some we've updated all of our heads to reflect that, and obviously we settle this.
And I will tell you, if the dispatchers do have to drive, for those of you that remember, we have increased our full-time staff at the facilities too, right? So we've added 2 supervisors and a full-time safety supervisor. So our full-time staff is much more robust. So if those dispatchers do have to go on the road, we still have people back in the office to dispatch, answer phones and so on. And just a little bit more about the pipeline. So we have one of the best starting rates. A new driver with absolutely no experience will start off at $24.50. We also offer the bonuses Bob mentioned. We have 10 paid holidays, 10 sick days. We have real health care, a PPO, Blue Cross Blue Shield plan for new employees that come to work. We have 401k. So we really believe that as we keep getting that word out there, what we have to offer, we can be the employer of choice in this, area, not just for the Council Rock School District. So.
I'll talk about routes as well. We've got 108 total routes with buses going on the road right now, having multiple segments. Most of them have 3 tiers. Of those 108, 68 of them are big buses, or what we call Type C buses, the bigger buses. 33 are Type A buses or vans, 24 passengers, 35 passengers, sorry. And then we have 4 wheelchair and 3 minivans. So the number of assets compared to, or buses we're putting on the road compared to our driver pool is tight, right? And that's where we're having some issues over the last few days with attendance. John talked about the 10 sick days that are in the collective bargaining agreement that they get. It seems like some of them are using them right now, so it's kind of creating a little bit of this issue. But as we increase our driver pool, we're not shooting for just 10% over our route pool. We're shooting for more like 20% because of those sick days, because of the number of people taking off. That was a little bit of a surprise to us. We didn't expect that kind of attendance issue. So that's going to be something we have to work through as a group, attack that issue.
And on the routes, we still have more buses arriving. Talked about the big buses. So we have 17 brand new buses that haven't even arrived yet. We're still dealing with some of those supply chain issues. One of them arrived Saturday. They're coming from Tulsa, Oklahoma, so they're still rolling in here. We do have more minivans on site, so as we increase that driver pool, there'll be flexibility for Matt and his team that we can continue to build those routes and so on. So there's still additional buses coming in.
Yeah, and we'll reflect on that when we get to the last slide, which is just a recap and then a move forward plan. We'll reflect on some of those things we've got going on behind the scenes to increase.
An update on the Pathfinder app. So I'll start from the beginning. We had an app, it's called the Durham Bus Tracker app, that we lost support for. And it, quite frankly, had we tried to roll that at the start of the school year, it would not have been a good situation. Just didn't have the support to give the quality product for the families of the district. So through the work of Dr. Sanko and Matt, there's an app through TransFinder, which is the routing software that the district uses, that we're able to get that app up and in place here in the upcoming weeks. And what that will do is that will be an app that we can use for this school year. And we have an app, it's a bus zone, brand new app, very robust, it works off of our GPS. that we will get in place for summer school so we can transition to that and be fully ready for the new school year. But this app that we're working on, we had a call again today, all the communications now in place, I would say right now, we've got our GPS with the trans finder, so a little bit above my head, the API addresses and all that communications happening, so we can get that app up and running as a fill-in until we get our bus app fully operational for the upcoming school year. And we're going to pay for that application during school services, so that's no additional cost to the district.
So just going over the first several days that we've had so far with the new contract with the district. Day one, and I'll just go through pretty quickly some of the day issues that we had or didn't have. Day one was a pretty difficult day. Dr. Senko came in, we met in the yard, and the reason it was a difficult day, most of it had to do with asset issues because the new assets drivers are used to, these drivers were used to brand new buses that they had, broken buses, and we'll get to that point at some point because we are bringing a new fleet in. But obviously we had to do a lot of things here to get up and running in time in such a short window. So we had some issues there that we had to work through, and we did. You know, it was the normal day one issues that we'll call having most of my districts. Days 2 through 4, we showed improvement each day. I think the district saw that. We started to see some less calls. We started to see drivers were getting out of the building much quicker. Yeah, I think we still have some attendance issues, absolutely. Did we still have some bus issues? Yes, but we started to see some continued improvement over that time. Day 5 happened to be a very good day. It was this past Tuesday. After the holiday, we had a much better day. We had a much better attendance day. And drivers were starting to get into the routine of coming to work and realizing that it was a different company they were working for and some of the different things we had in place. Day 6, which was yesterday, day 7 today, we struggled. I'm not going to say we haven't, and it's mostly due to attendance issues. We've gotten the asset issue put behind us. We've cleaned every asset again. We cleaned the roofs of the assets because that was brought to our attention that it wasn't sightly. We still have a few of those to do. We've worked with Washington to do that. But attendance definitely hurt us the last 2 days. We had 10 and 12 people call up in the last 2 days, on top of those 7 LOAs. So we're already behind with the LOAs, with those 7 people not being in. From that 110 people that we hired, we now have an additional 10 people. We didn't have that for a few days. We had 3, 4, and we're able to break up segments and work through that. So it's been a little bit a tough 2 days, I will tell you that. Over the first 4 or 5 days, we didn't cancel routes. We ran every segment that there was, yes, and we had to run them a little bit late because we had to add segments to other routes, fill them in where we could. It was mostly done over the radio. We met yesterday, we came up with a much better communication plan with the district. There were some communication issues there. That's the bottom point on the move forward plan. I just figured I'd talk about that now because we did have some communication challenges with the district. We've got a new system in place, so I think we went to move forward path, or path forward. John.
I can talk about that a little bit. So, you know, we got into the facilities, July 15th was the first one we got into. We went to work right away, and we were doing things behind the scenes, and one of the things that we're still working on is when you take the facility, we have to be the state of Pennsylvania inspection station. Like our mechanics are certified to inspect a bus. Step 1. Step 2 is the state trooper comes in and inspects that bus. So you'll see 2 stickers on the inside of every bus. We've submitted all of our paperwork and it's been in for probably 4 weeks. But the state of Pennsylvania uses a third-party quality control company that has to come certify our facility. We're still waiting on that. We've done everything, everything's in order. They just have to come out and say, yeah, you have all the equipment you need, all the jacks. So for us to, this new bus I told you about, next one, as those new buses come in, our guys will get them ready here. check the tires and make sure everything's in there. Then we'll have, until we get our own inspection license, we'll have to drive them to our facility in Philadelphia, get them inspected, put our sticker on there. Then we bring them back out here, and our state trooper can come here and inspect them. He has been inspecting that step here. So we're still working through that. We've upgraded floors, water, new refrigerators, all that stuff is ongoing. And that's been very important for the employees. It's given them a new, fresh look. When you move on to the buses, I already talked about that, implementation of the dispatch and driver software. We have a system called Bike Curve. It's probably online if somebody wanted to look it up. It's a very robust system that tracks that bus route, that driver, that asset, right? So the first step is that driver comes in and it's like a kiosk. They just swipe in, I'm at work, they go out to do a free trip and go. That's new to these drivers. They were using timesheets. So they're learning new as we go and they're getting better at it each day. Our dispatchers are getting better at using that system. So as we continue to do that, it'll continue to make our operations better, smoother, better information to Matt and to the team over here. Bob talked about the pipeline. We're going to continue that advertising. You can see our billboards up. We're on Indeed. I think Bob said, we had 48 hits on Indeed in the last 3 days of people actually applying. Now that's a little misleading. Probably half of those people will actually get for an interview, and we threw them 48 to 50 over a 2-day period is a pretty good deal. So we've got a lot going on. The team has been working really hard. We've got a great group over there, and we're only going to get better. But we got a ways to go yet, I will say.
Thank you so much. I'll open up for questions, comments. Mr. Hickey.
Well, I guess I'll start, okay. Well, it isn't what I bargained for, that's for sure. I mean, I was very unhappy with the previous service. I was one of the ones to get rid of them. You came in here before, you gave us a great presentation, and this week's been a disaster, at least in my opinion. A lot of the things you said, I don't understand why they weren't put in place sooner, but I guess my biggest issue is it's never so much the crime or the misdeed that's an effect, and it is, believe me, I'm not happy that we're missing and we're late and everything else. It's what happens when you are late or you are missing a thing. The communication has been absolutely atrocious, which was the biggest problem that we had with the service that we had last year. I'll just give you a perfect example. My next door neighbor, I'm not going to tell you what it was. I was out there today, and she's got 4 kids on the bus that are going to school. So she can't drive them. And you got to realize that a lot of parents are already at work, so they can't adjust their schedules. But anyway, it was 10 of 8. And I asked her, I said, oh, man, the bus is late again? And she said, yeah, this is the 3rd day in a row. It's been late. And yesterday I took my kids because I couldn't wait. I said, well, let me ask you a question. I said, well, were you notified, like anything about your bus being late? She says, no. So with that, at 10 of 8, she gets notified that the bus that she was supposed to get at 7:30 is going to be a half an hour late. So now we're thinking, well, is it a half an hour from now, or is it a half an hour from when it was due? Well, as it turns out, it was a half an hour from when it was due, so it actually showed up at around 8 o'clock, so it was a half an hour late. Now, this is the 3rd day in a row for the same round. And I'm not going to divulge names or anything you want to find out. I'm waiting there, and the bus driver opens the door, apologizes profusely to my neighbor. Her kids get on the bus. She says, look, if you want, I can give you my phone number, let you know what's going on. And I said to her, and I asked the bus driver, I said, well, when did you know that you were going to be late? And she said, oh, 6 o'clock this morning. So that's a 2-hour window that, like, at 6 o'clock this morning, whether you thought you could rectify the problem or not, if you would have notified the people on this route that the bus may be late, and it may be up to a half an hour late or whatever, they could have made other plans. I had a situation yesterday where I was involved in where someone was sitting on a corner and it was basically the same thing. I talked to the mother and she goes, well, I'm already at work. There's no way I can get my daughter to and from work. She goes, had I known an hour or two before when it was an ongoing incident, I could have made arrangements for my daughter, even though I couldn't be the one who takes her. And all the emails that I get, like I said, the service hasn't been the greatest. I can't say about other parts of the district, but we get the emails. But the biggest complaint that everybody says is the communication is just awful. And I don't understand, because in today's world, like people dealing with COVID and everything else, they're pretty flexible, like with making other arrangements and getting their kids to school in other methods. But when they're not told and they're sitting there, it's too late. And like I said, my biggest issue, like I said, is a lot of these things, as I look at them, why weren't they handled previously? Why wasn't there a little foresight? But the communication is awful, and that's got to be corrected like tomorrow.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. Communication. We met yesterday and we came up with a plan for communication. Being proactive instead of reactive. Just to your point, one of the things you had mentioned was that, you'd rather people know that there could potentially be a lateness problem, as opposed to a reactive where it's already late and now we're trying to contact them after the fact. So we came up with a plan yesterday afternoon, late in the day, that we're going to be communicating at 6:15 and 6:45, our first two communications to the district on anything that potentially is open. And I think that started today. And it was the first time we did it, so there's going to be a little bit of a process and change for the people who are in the office at that time, who are trying to do multiple things at one time. But we've narrowed it down to, let's be proactive with all the routes that we potentially have open that we know people are calling off on. Now, the issue where we have a little bit of a later issue is when people don't show up for work or call off. We assume John is coming to work. He's supposed to start at 6:30, 6:45. John still hasn't shown up. Now we have to react back to the district and say, there's another potential problem because John didn't even show up for work today. We were expecting him at 6:30. He should be on the road already. We're already 15 minutes behind the 8 ball. Now we're trying to reach out to the district again and say, listen, these are the late call-offs, so people that either didn't show up or late call-offs, we're reaching back out to the district. So we met yesterday and we were told some of these concerns and we put it into place today. And I would hope that as we progress through, we're going to get better with the communication. I hear you, I understand it totally, I agree, I'm not disagreeing with you. It's been poor the first few days. So, we did try to do something proactively going forward with the district yesterday when we met. And we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to improve our processes as we go along. 6 days into the school year, 7 days into the school year, not saying it's okay. 1 day into the school year is not okay to have poor communication, but it is a new contract and it does happen, and I'm not saying it doesn't. 4 days in a row is a problem, no doubt. 3 days in a row is a problem. We are trying to be proactive going forward, and that's what we put into place yesterday. So hopefully you will start to see improvement in that. As far as why didn't we do some of these things, our path forward stuff earlier, well, we received, we were doing stuff behind the scenes earlier. We were getting buses ready earlier. We did apply. You can't apply for a building permit to become a state certified facility until you are actually the occupant. So, and until the prior leasee is out. So as soon as the incumbent left, we moved in, immediately applied. The state is slowing us down, so we put in a contingency plan in to go to Philadelphia to get that work done. Even though it's adding time because we've got a shuttle, we've got to get drivers from Philadelphia and here because there weren't enough drivers that worked for us during the summer to shuttle the buses. So we were using Philadelphia drivers to come up, get buses, and bring them down there. So we did have plans in place. We didn't take over the Wrightstown facility until the 1st of August. And school started the 29th of August. That facility, we moved our maintenance team into, but we didn't even apply for a permit yet there because we can't. We have to get all of our equipment in. So we're also at the mercy of transportation and logistics to get it to us, and a lot of stuff is on back order. It's just the way it is right now in the country. So, we did do a lot of things behind the scenes early. We were recruiting out of a school and working from school district buildings, working from here for a period of time. I had a team here, we hired all of our office personnel to work out of this building to hire them and recruit people. So we were doing a lot of things ahead of time. Yes, could we have done more? Probably. I mean, we can always do more. But I do think that what we did early on is a testament to even having those 110 people ready to go on day one. Well, 103 because 7 of them couldn't work for us. But, we've been recruiting, we've been out there pounding the street. I've had a team of people here put flyers out in the community. We put billboards up along the highway so that people could see them. We've advertised our rates. We had to settle a collective bargaining agreement at last minute. So there was a lot of things that had to be done for us to hit the ground running. Now, has it been perfect? No. Will it get better? I guarantee it will get better. It's just a matter of having to put things in place and the process is in place. A lot of things are new to these people who are working for us. They've worked for the same company for a long time, or maybe the same company because they will have it and other companies, but we're taking them into the new era of knowledge and accountability. And that's important because they had none of that in the past. I'm not a silent leader, right? I have 12 facilities. I've spent the last 8 to 12 weeks in this facility because it's that important to me. So, you'll see John, you'll see me. I don't know how much you've seen in the predecessors, but we're there in the trenches with you guys every day. So we're not going to just turn our back. But I'm sorry that you dealt with that, and we will make it better. And hopefully it's communications.
Kristen?
I just had a quick question. And I appreciate Bob talking about the importance of communication. I think a lot of parents, especially yesterday, were like irate because they don't know either when their child is coming home or when, like, if they left for work and their child is at the bus stop and they're trying to panic and find another parent. I know one parent that offered to take another child to school, but that child wasn't sure if they were allowed to. Like, so it's like a lot of just undue stress, I think, and it's just purely communication. So I just agree with what Bob said, and that I'm glad that you're taking that step, and I hope it improves, because I don't think people have a lot of tolerance for that.
And I don't blame them. I'm sure that
and my question is, it says no routes canceled. Is that today, or is that since the beginning of
No, so we worked with the district today on a new plan for canceling if we did have to. So instead of running very late on the routes, there's a plan in place for canceling routes or segments of routes. So that was the first 6 days.
So but do you mean you did not cancel routes?
The first 4 days of school, we didn't cancel. From what I know, we did not cancel routes.
I mean, I know.
Very late.
And I don't know if you mean a whole route or just a portion of it, but like, I know I received a text message that my child needed a ride. I know that other parents in Wrightstown received that same
When
thing.
did you receive that? Yesterday?
I could show them to you.
No,
first day of school. First day of school.
First day?
First day of school. And then I know that there's another, it's in Northampton, parent that the bus was going to Wrightstown, that they had like a certain number of days where they received notifications. And certainly, I just pass things along when I see them, but I know I personally received that notification the first day of school. I know there's another parent that shared it with me, and he was in Wrightstown as well, different bus. But, you know, I just want to make sure that, you know, it's okay for this stuff to, you know, to happen if it gets fixed. And if things are positive, but I just don't like seeing a bullet on there saying no routes canceled, because it's 100% not true.
So, based on the feedback I got from the team, so and I'm not questioning you, because what you're telling me is true. No routes canceled, I was told no routes were canceled days 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll go back and take care of that. Fine.
I would just be careful of what you put on the slide, because as someone who lived through it and talked, and continues to talk to parents, it is as simply isn't true. So I appreciate all your work. I know it's gonna get better because it has to. Thank you.
And I can tell you, for example, in the radio room, you know, as we continue to update the routes, right? There's changes on the routes, and that's gotten better. The routes have started to settle down. I've heard less and less. I think all afternoon today, I heard maybe 3 times a driver taking a child to drop them off, and nobody was there. So they had to, you know, go on to another stop and come back to make sure a parent was there for that young child. Those things impact us, and those are less and less I'm hearing each day. Our drivers are doing the right thing by not letting that young child off without a parent there, so that's the good news. So I think as we get those routes settled down with less changes to the actual route themselves, it's going to help us be on time as well. So.
Yeah, and just to John's point for 1 minute, I think as we get further into this school year, where there's less changes, right now we're going through a lot of changes, and we talked about this yesterday as well, changing of routes and then having to rerun route sheets for the drivers. In some cases, I think we ran new route sheets this past weekend to put back out again this past Tuesday. We've come up with a plan with the district as well on a time frame that route changes will be implemented, right? Because to do a route change the night before and then expect it to happen the next morning creates issues with drivers getting lost or having issues. So we came up with a good plan with them yesterday. I think we had a really good meeting yesterday and came up with a lot of plans. And we started implementing them immediately last night. So I think as the routes settle down and changes become less prevalent, less during the week, then the routes will start to become a little bit more consistent, and for lack of a better term. But, yeah, so that's one of the things that we're working on as well.
Sorry, Mike, I'm waiting.
I'm going to be specific on a couple of routes, then I'll make my comment. Write these numbers down. Bus 46 and bus 29. They have never successfully run, ever successfully run. I want you guys to sit in those buses and ride with the drivers and figure out why. Because they aren't running. We're getting dozens of emails on these routes. Sit on the buses, figure it out, or hire new drivers. And that gets to my point. You don't have enough drivers to make this right. You don't have enough drivers. You don't have enough drivers to cover the routes. That's the problem here. I hear about a pipeline, but I don't see that number moving up. You don't have enough drivers to do this. That's the problem. It's just pure logistics. There aren't enough drivers. And if 10% or 15% call off every day, you're screwed. You are utterly screwed. And we can talk about this for days, but if you have a 15% drop rate every day, and you don't even have 100% coverage, you're in trouble. You know, on top of these problems where the routes just don't seem to be successful, I don't know how this gets better.
And I would add, I'd like to ask about the CBA. If they're entitled to 10 days off, does that carry over the following year?
No.
So they have to use it. So on an average day, you're going to.
Well, they can get paid off at the end of the year. So there's a payoff.
Most people use what they get.
Well, actually, we're being told most people use it for snow days and then.
Okay, we had 10 people call off today. So I'm saying you could see 6 people call off every day throughout the school year. And we'll never recoup. We'll never get back to where we want to be. John, you know, when I visited Newtown, the one word I can say, and one word I've said for the last 2 years, we have to find solutions. Last year, I proposed to the administration, we should talk about opening schools, we should keep schools late. Kids coming home at 5 o'clock from elementary school is unacceptable on every layer on a community-based school district. We have to find solutions. We know the problems, but we need solutions. This board was provided a flow chart. What happens when a driver calls out? 45 minutes it takes before Council Rock knows that we may have problems in that. That alone, that flow chart, is alarming at every aspect of communications, which is what we've been blamed about for years. Communications. The only thing that has not changed in the last 2 years is the drivers and the people attached to transportation. Everything else has changed. I need solutions. We have families here that are affected by it daily. My kids, your kids. We got to find solutions. I mean, I can't keep going after email, and this board gets them, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I had somebody call me, because my phone is listed on the Facebook, or our Council Rock page, blasting me. I'm not even in his area. But he got me on the phone. This kid was never picked up. We're number 29. Yeah. Guys, I don't know. I mean, you know, I think, you know, this could go a different direction very quickly, and I don't want it to. Because I think you came in here, you sold us a product, this board was completely behind Durham. But I will give a caveat. We're not the only district out there that's struggling. There's neighbors out there that have the same issues. Maybe it's the workforce, maybe it's a lack of work ethic, whatever you want to call it. But I want solutions that parents can wrap their arms around and say, you know what, it's not perfect, but it's something. And so you guys figure out how to work the backfill. But that call out rate, the sick time, you're gonna have sick. Can we say no to sick time? Can we tell them no, you need to come in? Can we tell them no, you can't have a day off? Like, think about it. You're behind the ball every day. You're never going to be in front of it unless you got 20 people sitting in your offices waiting for these people to call out. And when do they have to call out by? 10 o'clock before their shift. You'll never fill it. You'll never recoup from that.
And I told Dr. Senko, I want our team to have a 4-minute response time, not 45. If that means parking our people in your depots 100% of the time, take their desk out of here and get them in your depots. I want them out of here 4 minutes. That's all you get. 4 minutes response. These people need to know. You can't do this. 7:32 this morning, you alerted my neighbors that their bus was going to be late. School starts at 7:33. You can't do that. It's unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. To Ed's point, we need a solution. I see all the problems. I need a solution. That's what we contract you to do, solve them. So, I'm done. Mike, go ahead.
Actually, Ms. McKee and then Mike. Sure.
Thank you, and you literally stole my thunder. I'm feeling pretty thunderous about this. I agree with the points that were made. I do want to say thank you to Dr. Sanko for setting up a call center. You've been proactive. I feel that the district has been trying on our end. I thank Mr. Adams for his response, because as you say, we are getting the emails and the angry phone calls. I appreciate what the district is trying to do, but I have to look at the two of you and say, like my colleagues, I was dissatisfied with our previous service. I felt very optimistic about this. We all wanted to see you succeed. And I feel like here we are back again, and our families, our kids, are paying the price for this. Agreed, we need solutions, not yesterday. Bus 29, an elementary child arriving home at 5 o'clock, unacceptable. You spoke about communication in the morning for 6:15, 6:45. What about those late buses? How is a parent to know that my child is still riding the bus and it's 4:45 at night? What communication happens on that end? And I agree, really want to see solutions made here. I want to see more drivers. I want availability to improve. But at the moment, I'm sorry, I'm not cheering at this moment. Really unhappy with the way we've begun.
To start with the good news, you guys are a little bit of an improvement from last year. You've heard it around the room about communication. This community was torn apart, and this community is still sensitive about communication. So I'm seeing some things here that indicate that that's going to get better. The other issue is I completely agree about the numbers, the call-outs, and the driver issue, and that pipeline that we've been talking about. It's got to get better. I reviewed the flow chart. I also agree it's too much. And there's more that kind of goes with that. So this community was really looking forward, as well as this board, to having a change and having it be meaningful. And to start out with the first week or the first 6 days or however you want to put it, and kind of go back, everybody was like, here we are again. And to add on to this, communication and concern about where my child is the bus going to make it or not, a lot of people were looking forward to the app. As a board, I think we were all excited about seeing that app. And to have that rug pulled out from under the community at the last minute, and then you look at this flow chart and see this, that's what really I think was probably one of the final straws. And to have, and nobody knows who's going to be next. It's like a circular firing squad, unfortunately. And so I think that's where the frustrations are coming from. You've heard plenty. In fairness to you, I feel like adding some more, but at the same point, I like to see the two of you guys in here. You're saying that you're going to try to fix problems. So we're expecting solutions. We're seeing some, but we really need this quickly, because I think that this climate is going to get a lot more difficult if we don't. With First Student, there was ability to contact them directly and get information. Now, I'm not a proponent or a detractant from this, but my understanding is there's no way for people to call your depot directly and contact. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing either, but that's where the communication to this district really needs to be quick. And I agree with Dr. Thorward. If that means putting our people in your depot to foster this connection between the two of you, that's fine. I like to hear that you guys led off with that you've got it identified. We're overdue on seeing a change. And so I think that this is only going to get worse if it doesn't get better.
I can tell you, the real bottom line is drivers, right? We have the tools, we know how to use the tools, we'll get better at that each day. We do have phones. I'll have to kind of circle back on that. I mean, I've had some taken parent calls at our facilities. So
yeah, like I said,
I don't. There's a disconnect somewhere.
I completely agree. But if you guys can solve the problems and that doesn't happen, then it's not needed. So right. To some degree, the fact that some people were able to do that in previous years doesn't necessarily be a big proponent that that's the way you want to operate. So I'm not advocating that, but that helps that connection between the two that's got to get done.
Absolutely. If you fully staff and you have the 20%, not the 10%,
right.
20%, 10% doesn't do it. I got that.
Yeah, and
not getting these calls.
Everybody's at the.
You're not getting the emails. You're not seeing the kids standing on the corner. You got that.
We, as a board, we could probably tell you story after story after story after phone call and email that we've got, along with some of our personal information. But I'm hopeful that you guys have this message, and I don't know what happens to the drivers. If you said you were unexpected, that this was more than normal, do we take this as a board, as a community, as an administration, that the drivers are, quote, playing games, or is that off the table?
No, I don't think they're playing games. I think it's when I look at.
I think we have to work. I think
that's change.
We need to change.
That's in multiple phases. That's not just in attendance. We've got to change your work ethic in multiple phases. So it's once they're in front of us, now we see what the work ethic is, right? We see that they don't come to work, or they call often, right? So we got to change that mentality. I met with two stewards just the past 2 days and said, something's got to change here, because we've had someone call us the last 2 days. We didn't have that the first 4 days. We've had it the last 2 days. Right. So, getting 10 sick days doesn't mean they should use 10 sick days. They get paid out at the end. So, you know, he's telling me, well, we use them for mostly snow days and stuff. Well, no, that's not the case right now. We've got 10 call-ups on one day and 12 call-ups the next day. So that's not the case. So, you know,
Yeah, I mean, if, in one of my previous positions, if I got a $3,000 signing bonus and I decide to call out 30 minutes before, you know, one of my first days, and I decided to call out for another couple days, I'm not around very long in that position.
they don't get the 3,000 sign-on bonus the day they're hired.
Yep.
It's prorated and backloaded as well. So
Good.
it's all in the cost. We usually do it over 16 months, so it covers 2 school years and it's backloaded.
It's not so much about the sign-on bonus, it's more about the call-out. If I called out at any one of my previous employers in the first week, they wouldn't have work for me the second week.
Well, as we said, we're gonna keep hiring, and the real key is 20% above, right? The industry, they say 110%, we won't stop there. We will never stop hiring here.
When do we get to
Tell you that.
when do we get to 120?
When did we get there? That's a loaded question. I can't answer that question. That would be suicide if I told you we get there in a month. And we're not going to get there. I mean, 120, you know, we're not even at 100% yet, right?
Right.
So, we're basically at 100% if everybody is working. All the people of LOA, we're at 110 on 108 routes. So we're at 100%. You know, 120 is another 18 drivers to cover what we need to cover. We've got 15 in our pipeline right now with recruitment coming in next week to give us some support to get more people into our pipeline. It takes 6 to 8 weeks at a good rate, 6 to 8 weeks to get somebody hired because of all of the testing they need to go through the state, and going through backgrounds and stuff like that. So you're talking on a good person who can get through a CDL road test after just being behind the wheel for 8 to 10 hours. That's probably close to a 6-week process just for that person off the street.
Is that the length of the pipeline, 6 to 8 weeks?
No, our pipeline goes out as far as it has to from when people are hired. Now, people learn at a different rate, right? Some people can do it in 6 weeks, some people it takes 8 to 12 weeks, depending on when they can pass that CDL permit test. And a lot of them have a problem passing. We've got 3 people who failed the general knowledge test we brought in today because they failed it last week. We brought them in today to go through general knowledge with them again so they can go to motor vehicle and take the test.
Yeah.
So it's you know.
I see 2 guys that are motivated, that are interested, that are committed to solving this problem. We just need the solutions and a couple more answers. So whether that happens offline with administration or Matt Adams, as long as it gets taken care of, that's great. And then we don't have to do this again.
So I think we've all received so many calls and emails from parents complaining, and I know what you're saying, that there is a shortage of bus drivers, so it's not an easy solution. But I do think that the communication part has to happen independent of the number of drivers that you have, because I don't know if when the app is available, maybe it would be easier. And I think it's going to take another month for the app to be available. I don't know. But I mean, at least the parents should know when to expect the bus, if there's going to be a bus coming, and if it's late, how much it's late. And if a parent will understand if for whatever reason a route is cancelled, so they will try to find alternative ways, but they need to know in advance so they can take their kids to school or they can ask for help and so on. So the communication part, solving that, should be easier than finding enough drivers. And for that, I think we have to work really, really quickly to figure it out.
Just, I don't want to harp on it, but you have contracts with other districts, correct?
Certainly.
And you're telling us that Council Rock is the only district that had these unexpected call-outs in the first week?
I don't know if they would be unexpected. I think our first 4 days of call-outs was minimal. If you look at the first 4 days, we maybe had 3 or 4 people call out. I would have expected, history was telling me that the day after Labor Day would be a day that we would see call-outs, right? Just in our industry, people tend to say, 3-day weekend isn't good enough for me, I need 4. We actually had a very good day of attendance on that day. It showed up Wednesday and Thursday, I think is what Bob was trying to say, that it's kind of unexpected. I would say the average in the industry, and again, a little different everywhere, is probably 10% call-outs per day. 10% of that workforce is going to call out. That's why we try to set up 110% of staffing. We're going to go further, of course.
And I don't know if you can do anything like that. Is there any way to minimize the number of call-outs that you're going to allow or whatever, say over the next month? And then that way, by the time, now granted, it's going to bite you on the back end because then now people are going to be taking 10 days off over a 7-month period as opposed to an 8-month period. But if you can minimize the number of people who are allowed to take off on a particular day, then maybe we don't have this problem. And if we can hold off to do this for a month, maybe you can get some people in the pipeline. So now, when 10% of the people call off, we now have the backup, or some other thinking outside the box that I'm unaware
And
of.
we can certainly look at that. And the other thing is we do have attendance bonuses in there too, right? Our drivers have the opportunity to earn extra money by having perfect attendance. But I get your point. How can we just filter that down the line where we can hopefully do that? I get it.
We're also, you know, you can't say only, and there's a collective bargaining issue, and I'm not blaming the union on this at all, because people get sick time in their bank. They can use it however they want, whenever they want. We can't tell people, you can't call off. We can only have 3 people call off, and then the 4th person calls off, and we try to get them to come to work. Don't get me wrong, we ask them. Listen, we're already short. Can you make it in here today? Can you please get in here? We're already up against the gun here. But for us to say we can only allow 5 people to call off or 3 people to call off, and just giving you, for instance, that's not going to fly. We could try to get people to come to work is what we could do, and that's what it's because you're not just dealing with a workforce, you're dealing with a workforce that's represented, and they get 10 sick days and they can use them any day.
I don't know, I'm just saying, like, you know, we can incentivize people who make it in for a full week as opposed to a full year.
We can look at that.
That we can do.
We can look at that. I got what you're saying.
Bob, well, let me ask you this. The bus driver calls out at 6:30. You had 10 people go out at 6:30. And I'd like an answer on this. Those 10 routes, what were the parents told?
I'm sorry?
What were the parents told on those 10 routes that those employees called out on?
As soon as we know people call out, we're creating a list at 6:15 and getting it over to the district. I'm telling them that these are potential problems. We then.
Well, it's not a potential problem. It's beyond potential. It's actually, if I was at an airport, the plane's canceled.
Yeah.
Or it's delayed very long.
So now, once we know somebody calls off, we start breaking up that route immediately. Or we try to put a cover driver on that route, depending on cover drivers, how many cars.
So the parents, according to the flow chart, are still not notified during this process.
No, they're not.
That's where I'm saying.
Right.
If somebody calls out at 6:30, it should be canceled, with more information possibly coming, or your bus is automatically delayed at this point.
That's what we just started yesterday.
That's, I think
that
the
your
parents,
bus is potentially going to be canceled, giving them an opportunity to find alternate transportation.
but that's got to be done at by 6:15, 6:30.
Well, that's what we're doing
Right.
now.
No, I understand that. I'm just reiterating, that little thing goes a long way for a lot of parents. Because now you're handing your kid off, whatever the deal is. The kid's walking, whatever the deal is at that point. The notification that Dr. Thorwald used after the fact is not flying. And I think I think parents will understand that, look, 6:30, it just went off. That person didn't come in. I'm not blaming the drivers. The drivers are doing a great job. They're doing the best they can. We all are, I think, to some extent. We just got to find that little solution goes a long way. Because I'm going to be mad but at least I know my kid's gonna go over to the neighbor's house, or my daughter's gonna take her in, or something. It's that 45 minutes that's on that flow chart. That's minutes of a parent losing time, as one parent put. I lost all my sick time last year. I was in arrears. I lost money. That doesn't float when we're talking about putting $31 million project online. Doesn't float in this district, and shouldn't float in any district. It's unacceptable. So that's, Bob, sorry I jumped in there, but.
No, and you're right, when it comes to communication, and that's where we started that process this morning.
And I appreciate that.
Sure, it wasn't perfect.
No,
But
I mean,
we're gonna continue to work that process until it is perfect. And we'll just take a day, we'll take 2 days. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we really hit the nail on the head in terms of the fact that there are really 2 issues. One is communications, and the other is the driver problem. And Kristen talked about it, Yoda talked about it. It is really a matter of communicating to parents so they know what's going on. That's separate from the driver issue. I'm confident that Durham is doing everything it can. I mean, I don't think these gentlemen want to have to deal with a driver shortage. I think if there was a magic bullet or hiring a sufficient number of drivers, I'm confident that these guys would have found it and that we would have 120% of drivers. I'm confident that Matt and Dr. Sanko are on top of this bus situation on a daily basis. And, you know, it is, I think there were a number, particularly the bargaining last minute curveball that got thrown to you guys. I think there were difficult circumstances. I think I'm appreciative that Durham was willing to take on this contract, but it's got to get better. Parents deserve to know whether or not their kid's going to get picked up or dropped off before 5 p.m. It is an absolute mess. I am confident, though, that people are intent on solving the problem, led by Dr. Sanko and Mr. Adams. And, you know, we clearly want to see it fixed. And if there are things that the board needs to do to make it happen, you know, the board obviously cares a lot, and so does our community. And this was a good discussion.
Well,
let's
Yoda and I have been back and forth with a couple of parents. They're losing all hope. They haven't had a good bus ride yet. I mean, I gave you the numbers. They haven't had a good bus ride yet. They're just done.
Understand.
Well, I can tell you, and I guess, you know, as this conversation goes on, I want to point out one thing that I don't think I have. We've got a lot of great bus drivers in this district, okay? And those drivers, because I don't want this to go that path that it's not our problem, it's not Durham's problem, because we got a bunch of sorry bus drivers. That's far from the case. We've got drivers out there every day, you can listen on the radio, that help when that driver calls in sick last minute. I'll pick it up, I got this. So we just need more of them. Okay, so that's the one part. And the second part is, I hear it loud and clear. We're going to improve this communication. Step 1 was the plan that we put into place today. I hear it loud and clear. You know, I raised 4 kids. Mine are all older now, and I can only imagine, I have grandkids, the pain and the stress it puts on those families. So I take it personal. I know Bob does. I look like, to me, it says Ziegler Bus Service on the side instead of Council Rock. You have that commitment from me. And I don't have the magic bullet yet, but we're here every day trying to find it. And we're going to get more drivers and improve the communication. So we hear it loud and clear.
It's a passionate community that just wants what they feel they deserve. And I think the telling part about the administration is this man showing up in your
neck of the woods at 6:30 in the morning, because he's on the phone with me at 6:30 in the morning, saying, I just left Newtown and I'm headed to Wrightstown. And then he runs every school every day and runs the organization. I don't want him in your, I don't want him taking care of your problems. He needs to be in our schools and then running the organization. But guess what? No matter what we say, he's still gonna be there. And that shows you how much we all care about getting this right. And that's an important part that shouldn't be lost on anybody.
Absolutely.
Okay. May I wrap it up and say?
If I may,
Yes,
just,
please.
it wasn't mentioned, we sent it out to our community, the bus app that John spoke about. We're in the process of testing right now. We sent out to the community that it would be live for the district on September 29th, and we're on target for that. So Matt is beta testing, and I would publicly like to thank Matt Adams and Matt Frederickson, who've done the legwork on this to get the TransFinder app. So for our community, I know we sent it out on paper, but I want to say it publicly. We are expecting this app, the Stop Finder app, to go live on the 29th.
Thank you, Matt and Matt.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to say, I know you guys have been working since you came on board, and a lot of hiccups have happened, and I know that you've got all other posts, and I see you're still here a month into it. So I appreciate it. I mean, it's a new partnership. It's going to be, if it's rocky, it's always rocky for a lot of us, a lot of these new contracts in this. So I'm not giving excuses, but I'm trying to keep a positive outlook that things will improve. I mean, a lot of bus routes have been good. Maybe there is, as Mr. Roosevelt said, some improvements in certain areas, and there's a lot of things that, a lot of routes, like Dr. Thorward had mentioned, 46, 29. I have 48 that people called me from church in Levittown saying my grandson's not getting in. So, I mean, there are certain routes that you will, I know, address. It's the driver shortage. I just wish there was a service out there that, I know there's CDL licenses, the guys are independent, but they're just not background checked to work with kids. But that would be another thing to try to find. If we can get that sub-room filled, that room filled, I think that covers a lot of it. But one of the disappointments was the app. If that could have been known 3 weeks earlier, then we could have started the year like that, and a lot of these questions, maybe, hopefully that's going to solve a lot on the 29th. But I know that you guys are working, and you're here to do and fulfill the promises that you made, and I'm going to keep that hope alive. I think we all should pray on it, to be honest with you. You've got to do that. So there's power there. Without that, this is a subject that maybe, if no one else wants to speak at the table, I'll open it up to the for public comment. So please state your name and where you live.
Kenneth Christie, and I live at 100 Drive.
Okay.
And gentlemen, first of all, thank you for being here, because I know it's hard to come here to these kind of meetings to hear what's going on. And ladies and gentlemen of the board, I appreciate that you kept everyone anonymous to talk to you, but I also know how hard it is when you're listening to anonymous stuff. So I will tell you, I am Kenneth Christie. My son is Giovanni Christie, and he is on Route 36. Today at 1:17 p.m., I received an email saying that there was no bus service to take my child home. I'm an assistant principal in the school district of Philadelphia. My wife is a school district of Philadelphia teacher. My next door neighbor is a school district of Philadelphia teacher, and her husband is a police officer. Which of us can leave? I had to call my superintendent, Dr. Watkins, and say, Counselor Watkins left my student stranded at school. And I've only met him once, but I'm going to assume that if one of your employees called the first time calls, hey, things happen, no problem, we got your school, you're covered. But there's only so many times I can call my superintendent up and say, hey, one of your administrators needs to leave because their school district left them stranded. My son's 6 years old. My mother-in-law lives with me, doesn't drive. I count on that bus service to keep my child safe. Me not being in my school, I have 1,257 students in my school. I left my school with just a principal to
the supervisor told me 57 students at dismissal. If my wife had left, she would have left the 30 students in her classroom. If my neighbor this week cooperated on getting the kids off the bus, if she had left, it would have been her 33 students, but she has an upgrade. Her husband, a police officer, that would just happen. His captain wasn't going to let him leave. So I want to put a face to what's really going on here. Because once again, I know it's anonymous and you don't have the story. It's easy to say that these are numbers, but these affect real lives, and not only do they affect our lives, they also affect the people that we touch at our homes. So I'm asking you guys, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I can't plan for that. If you had sent an email in the morning that said, hey, we can get your kid to school, I'm going to leave it up to you because we know we can't get you at the end of the day, that's a decision that I can make whether or not my child stays home or not. And, you know, whether it's excused absence or not, I'm not going to worry about it because my child, I recognize that valuable education is my child will be there when he can. But you left my child stranded instead. And because you left my child stranded, I have put the lives of those 1,200 other students at my school in jeopardy. So please, the communication really needs to get better. If you know in the beginning of the day that there's going to be a problem, you have to let us know so we can make plans for the rest of the day. And that's all I'm asking.
Thank you. Anybody else? If you want to
No,
respond. It's up
I
to you. You
hear
don't
you
have
loud
to.
and clear.
You don't have to. Say your name and township.
Nicole Conway, Township. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Durham, and Education for being here. I first want to say that my bus driver, I'm lucky because at least my morning route has been very consistent, and bus driver has been the same bus driver, and she's been amazing. I don't think, first of all, I keep hearing the word parents are complaining. I don't think they're complaining. We have children that are, their basic right in Council Rock or any district is to get to and from school safely in a timely manner. So again, I don't think we're complaining. I think it's just something that we're expecting. It's not a whole lot. So this week, I know that the only communication I've received is from my principal other than Tuesday. So like my bus, the Acton bus, I'm speaking only out of my own experience, has been late every single day. And I generally get the communication at the time I'm at the bus stop waiting to pick up my child. And that communication that I've been receiving is generally from the building principal. Meanwhile, sometimes my child is one of those I picked up at almost 5 o'clock. And I've been waiting out there for 45 minutes. And not only this, I've also seen our building principal, you know, get yelled at literally at back to school night because of 3 of one family's children didn't get picked up or dropped off, and they're parents. If the bus that my son comes home on is late getting to school to pick up every single day, there's also staff members that have to stay beyond their contractual time on a daily basis. And again, last year, my son did not take the bus because there were transportation issues. And our bus was arriving to school late every single day, so he would have missed the morning routine every single day. And I did not feel that was a great way to start the day as a second grader. So I can't imagine what families, the students, we talked about, you know, employees, we talked about buses, we talked about all of this, but we're also not talking about the students. You know, what it feels like to be abandoned, left at a bus stop, not knowing how you're going to get to school, how you're going to get home, or is my mom or my dad or whoever going to even be there? It's 45 minutes since the time you should have arrived. And again, communication is, I'm already at the bus stop, the bus should be there, and it's just arriving at the school. And I've spoken to the bus driver, and she's been very friendly. She says it's not the fact that, you know, in the afternoon, the middle school pickup, she's clear on the other side of town, then she has to go and drop off and then go on her elementary route. And I know she's working very hard, and I thank her every day, and, you know, she's been very friendly. But this is, again, we're not complaining. This is something that parents shouldn't have to sit here and beg for communication or expect transportation to and from schools for their children. So, I'm sorry, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Wendy Nowicki. I'm in Upper Makefield Township. I'm not going to reiterate what we've already heard. do want to start with positive. Bus 43, the driver in elementary school is amazing. She's fantastic, and we really like her. But I do just want to say, other than everything that's already been said here, besides the communication issues, and as infuriating as that is, when I look at that review of the first several days, the disconnect is almost infuriating because it's wildly inaccurate. Wildly inaccurate. And I think that there are parents that I'm already getting messages from who are seeing this now and their heads are exploding. And when this, hits social media tomorrow, I think we'll get some more emails about how inaccurate that is. And I don't know where the disconnect is, but the no groups canceled or just 11 groups delayed the first day, the very good no major issue day. I know at least 7 that were canceled. I know many that were canceled. So I don't understand how we can put that up there, and I think it's actually more infuriating to see that, quite honestly. It just feels like there's a serious disconnect about what is happening versus what you believe or relay that is happening. And I think it's just unacceptable.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other public comment, I would just leave it to any final words to anybody on the table. We'll say, good luck, gentlemen. I think I'm going to keep it positive. Try to keep it positive, but of course you know what you have to do and you're going to do it. So I'm going to just adjourn this meeting. Thank you.